so we've got a great group today for this. I'm excited to share what I got. I got about an hour and a half. I should get going. You guys ready? Mm-hmm. All right, so we're thanking the Marion Institute for putting this on. It's a great thing. Saw some great presentations this morning. I'm wondering if I could keep it up to par. I'm a little bit self-conscious of that, but I'm going for it. Basically, what I'm going to talk about for the first half of this is the merging or the evolution between myself, our location, and this project that we got going on called The Acres in New Hampshire, in which we wrote a book called The Community Scale Permaculture Farm. I'll start with myself. I am born in a very much entitled white guy. My parents are both medical professionals. We moved to North Carolina in the 1970s, and my dad joined a medical partnership, a radiological partnership with five other guys. And when he graduated or retired, however you want to call it, there was like 33 of them. It made a lot of money treating cancer and illness and stuff with X-rays. You know, it's high-tech medicine. Made a lot of money. Made my life very easy. Took a lot of vacations. Spent a lot of time watching TV when I was a kid. Video games, crap like that. It is sort of disturbing to be at this juncture. I feel like sort of in some sense I'm paying penance for all that, because it really was just like have anything I really wanted in life. We were pioneers of suburbia. We moved to North Carolina and we took the farmland that was there, this tobacco belt farmland in Pitt County, North Carolina, and we turned it into houses. You know, this is the time when my dad's medical partnership is going from 5 to 33. North Carolina is experiencing 7 to 10% growth. That means the doubling time is 7 to 10 years. So every 10 years, there's twice as many convenience stores, there's twice as many stoplights, there's twice as many houses, twice as many schools, twice as many people, twice as many problems, right? They're taking all the best farmland first. It's easiest to set up the subdivisions. It's easiest to put the roads in. It's easiest to put the septic systems and the sewage systems in place. So they go bananas. They really did. I mean, the neighborhood I grew up in had 4 or 5 houses in it. When I left, yeah, over 40 or 50. You know, all the forests that were around the property the little house we're in got cleared and houses got built. Done deal. The culture that was there, you know, it's tobacco culture, agricultural culture, basically destroyed, transformed. People, the tobacco market falls, which is probably a good thing, but it really did. There wasn't anything to replace it. So what replaced it is strip malls and just sort of Domino's pizza. Not much by way of a culture of the place. It's the culture that you import and you put in shopping and development. So that's sort of what I grew up with. It's depressing to some degree, and it left me feeling, in a sense, homeless. It left me, in a sense, feeling without a real culture. We were transplants from the north moving there to begin with, and all this rapid growth and movement and everything really. I didn't really feel at home. I don't feel at home in the South. I ended up going to school in Colorado, and that was a shift in my life. I went to school in Boulder, Colorado. Once again, one of these things that's like, Mom, Dad, can you send me to this really nice, fancy place? And they sent me. Boulder, Colorado is a very affluent place. It's a place where lots of people want to live. It's growing very quickly. I moved there in the 90s, and it already had shifted from like Mork and Mindy sort of small town thing to a place that was growing very rapidly. I learned 2 things at the University of Colorado. I learned the problems of the world. They had them all wrapped up in a neat package, and you go to class and you learn about it. It's pollution, overpopulation, resource depletion. What do we got? Overconsumption. We got climate chaos. We got mass extinction. This is it in a nutshell. We probably got a couple more, yeah? But these are huge, huge problems. And it was great to learn all that. It was depressing. especially because they weren't really shouting out any solutions. It wasn't a solution-based education. It was an education of, here's the problems, they're yours. You know, what you gonna do? So paid them for that and thanked them. And then also while I was here in Colorado is really where I got all sort of perturbed by my white entitlement. I mean, I'm of this class of people that loves to talk about all these problems, but isn't doing much about them. Really, there's so much academic discussion, there's so much blah, 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 I wish. And in Boulder, it's infectious. You got trustafarians drive down to Whole Foods from their mountain place, pick a Range Rover, pick out some really nice ingredients, and then drive back up to their mountain house. And there's no water out there. There's no, the food system is not intact. There's not a food system. It's mostly imported, as most of the food here is from the California or foreign countries. So, Boulder, sort of depressing as well, yeah? A little bit depressing there in Boulder. I was fortunate after college to have the opportunity to get on my bicycle and leave Boulder, and I moved up to a place in the mountains of Colorado and attended a school called Solar Energy International. Really great place where I learned a whole heck of a lot in a short amount of time. It's more or less practical and theory of renewable energies. You know, we did a 2-week session on wind, 2-week session on microhydro, a month on PV. We did another 2-week session on alternative construction techniques. So I had a real big immersion in actual doing things, which is for the first time in my life, actually doing stuff. Really powerful experience where I also learned about permaculture. A man by the name of Ed Eaton, who I will always thank, introduced me to permaculture, showed me the Bill Mollison video where he's like in a sarong and he's talking about the septic system and, reusing the methane gas and so forth. Just sort of opened my eyes to this permaculture. And permaculture, to me, it's hard to put in a nutshell, but the real fundamental element of it that appeals to me, it is a design school, an ecologically based design school. In as much as we are trying to use principles and trying to use experimentation to live as nature intended us to live, and live within the boundaries of nature. Use tools such as mimicry and trying to integrate and to develop a system that's holistic to meet our goals. That's really important to me to consider with permaculture is it's a design system that we have a goal we're trying to reach. And that is super fundamental for me to wrap my head around, because like in society these days, we have all these problems, the myriad of things that we need to address, and I think it's real important to get us some goals. Okay, so that's sort of my history up to a certain juncture. Now I'm going to bring in the history of the land and the history of the location. So I live in New Hampshire. It's Appalachia. It's mountainous. The Appalachian Mountains were once the largest mountains in the world, tallest mountains. About 50,000 odd years ago, a glacier came down over us. A mile of ice. So when that melted, it was floods of biblical scale, yeah? They stripped the mountains. It's amazing. There's places on our property where the sand is 80 feet deep from when a mile of ice melts. And so where the property we live is right on the top of the chain there. And so everything went downhill. And so that's what made like the beautiful Connecticut Valley soil, and even the Pemigewasset River and the river basins. They have beautiful soils from the land, from the organic material that used to be on our land. It all washed down 50,000 years ago. So it's like ledge in and sand is basically what we're living on up there. So it's challenging terrain. Then we have the history of man up there. We have, before the colonial period, we have Abenakis living in that area. They're mostly settled, once again, in the fertile flatlands. Like the work that they were doing on our actual property where we live was mostly probably foraging, hunting on occasion, but the actual settlements were in the flats. When the settlers came, this is a relatively short period of time ago, right? 200 odd years ago, the town was first chartered and settled in 1784. So, 230 years ago thereabouts, yeah? Not really that long ago. All these settlers showed up, and they did bad things. They chopped down all the trees, and they tried to duplicate their agricultural system that they had imported from Europe. So they brought a bunch of sheep, right? So these people tried to create the analog for the farming system they were used to on our property. And they built lots of stone walls. They worked really hard, and from the time they settled, 1784 to about 1850, the population grew to about 1,200 people. So pretty rapid growth in this little town where I live. Those 1,200 people at the time of the Civil War, everything crashed. Like catastrophe clash. We had various factors. The Civil War happened, which the town paid for. They had to sponsor the troops. The federal government wasn't organized in the way it is today. Like the towns had to put up money for the troops. So the town was bankrupt until the early 1900s from that expense. So you have 4 or 5 years where all the young men leave town. So who chops the firewood? Who keeps anything going in town? It goes. Then you have the industrialization of America. Everybody's wanting to move to the mill towns. Unless you have free land in Ohio, everybody leaves. When the people who bought the property before us moved there in the 1940s, there's 90 people in the town. So from 1850 to 1940, it goes from 1,200 people to 90 people. Okay, this is from a series of factors. Them operating the system of a monoculture, just going with sheep, and then destroying their natural resource base. They chopped all the trees down. So they had no real economy to stand on. The sheep market collapsed after the Civil War. It just wasn't going anywhere. It wasn't a multi-dimensional economy. It wasn't an economy where they really valued and nurtured their natural resources. So this is where my story gets a little bit more interesting, because I think you guys are a little bored. It's where my family comes into it. Alright, here we go. My great-great-grandfather immigrated from England to New Bedford. Right? He was a carpenter, and he worked down in one of the mills on the south side. So he comes to New Bedford in, say 1900, 1905, somewhere around there. He has a daughter and a son. My grandfather and my great aunt. My great aunt, she's got loose feet from the beginning, right? She's not really like a homebody. She's interested in exploring the world, seeing stuff. So she leaves as a teenager, right around when the mills started having real union issues here. There's a real sort of disintegration of the textile industry. My great aunt said, "Look, I'm out of here." She moved down to Hartford, Connecticut, and met my great-great uncle. My great-great-uncle was from the northern kingdom of Vermont. They met in Hartford, Connecticut. This is in the 1930s.
Did you say kingdom?
The northern kingdom.
Northeast.
Northeast. Okay, we'll call it the Northeast Kingdom. It's just a location in Vermont. It's like
Okay, but there wasn't a political structure that was actual kingdom. I've never.
No.
Okay.
What we call
Just call
St.
it.
John's.
Actually, I think there was a time that they did try to set up a separate state, but they never.
Succession is still an option. But so he had lots of experience living on the land. Yeah. And he convinced my aunt, who was sort of a city girl, to move back to the land. So there's this whole generation of people in the United States that read some books. There's a book called 5 Acres of Independence that was real popular around that era. and lots of people from the urban area who are experiencing, the problems we have today, the pollution, the lack of community, the crime, the lack of your ability in the city to provide for yourself and your family, the sort of resilience that the people were yearning for. My uncle convinced my aunt to move to this town in New Hampshire, 1940. So this is before electricity, this is before running water. This is something my aunt had been used to her whole life. So she moved to New Hampshire, and she said she cried for like 2 years. This was like, what the heck is going on here? But fortunately, she stuck it out. So then they went on. They did hobby farming. She did a lot of artisanal work. She was a decorative artist, so she did a lot of painting as well as taught classes in painting. Did pretty high-end work in terms of decorative artwork. In 1997, my uncle had predeceased her, and they had decided to give the land to my parents because they had no heirs. They had no one, no living children to pass the farm on to. So in 1997, I'm in Alaska doing some construction work, and I get a phone call that says, your great aunt has lost her driver's license. She's like 89 years old. She failed her driver's test, and we don't want to, she didn't want to go to a home. We don't want to put her in a home. Are you willing to start this farm? And I say, wow, I'm 25. It's just, I'm in Alaska. I'm going to go live with my 89-year-old aunt on a farm with a town population of 300. And so I went for it. I dropped what I was doing and moved in with Aunt Edith. And that's now where we get to talk about the community scale permaculture farm. Because we were, it was a group of us that moved onto land. My sister and 3 other friends. And that we had been working, collaborating through the past couple of years on different farms and sort of trying to build our skills because we were all interested in getting on a piece of property. So I brought them over from the West Coast, and oh man, we learned a lot really quick. And I think that's really where we gravitated to this educational model, is because we were such novices, like incredibly idealistic and inept and naive. Just totally naive as to all this business, how to actually grow food, particularly in New Hampshire. Cold, short growing season, just really this terrible soil. When I got into farming, I figured all farm soil was the same. Oh boy. So I'm going to switch gears here and go more into this.
What year was that you moved on to the farm?
97. So D Acres is the name we've come up with. Originally this name was in really acknowledgement of the people in the place. My uncle Delbert, my Aunt Edith, who I called Aunt D, it was Uncle Deb and Aunt Edith, and in Dorchester. So we were faced with the dilemma of calling it 3D acres or D cubed. And it just wasn't going to work. So we called it D acres. And then we had an epiphany a couple of years later that we had an acronym. We built up an acronym. It's called Development Aimed at Creating a Rural Ecological Society. Lucky us, huh? Whew. So we sort of have that concept that we're trying to form a service-based, farm-based organization. So it's more than a farm. It's going to be a place where we have a lot of community programs, a lot of community outreach. It's a very public place. It is a fishbowl. It is everything you do. People come by, oh, why'd you do that? What? Oh, that doesn't look like it's doing so good. Like you could do smarter there. It is that type of place. I mean, it is definitely the place where everybody is giving you tons of advice and showing up, and it's a sharing place. it in some sense replaces like historical antecedents like the Grange. Grange is really popular in the United States in the late 1800s. It was served as a community support network for farmers. I also consider it sort of similar to other urban structures like the Y, because we have playground, we have kids activities, we have all kinds of family programming, as well as recreation. There's tons of mountain biking, skiing, hiking, snowshoeing, that sort of thing. There's a lot of that going on site. But it sort of fills this void that we have in the rural economy, where people can connect. We have a lot of community events. We have one basically every weekend of the month. We have a regular scheduled community event. So this ranges from like a breakfast to a movie night, and there's also open mic potluck. So 3 of the 4 weekends a month, something's going on. And they all have a relationship to the food and to the place. Like there's always food. Food is the cornerstone of it, and it's either produced on site or it's locally owned. We try to source as locally as possible. We also run a variety of other, say, workshops. We run a permaculture design course, as well as different types of events to get the people to get their hands into it and get them face to face. Next weekend, or the weekend after this, is the Porcine Festival. So it's getting to know the pig over 3 days. We'll harvest a pig one day. We'll go out and shoot a pig with some people, and then we'll take it apart, and we'll try to make something with every last part of it. And we put up flyers all over town, all over the region, and say, come on, it's free. You come, help, let's clean and test this together. It's a total immersion and total, like, how do I say it? We try to demystify things. We really want to take the expertise and the specialization out of some of these basic things. You know that everybody should be able to take apart a chicken. If you eat chicken, you should be able to take it apart. You should really think about being able to kill one. So it's demystifying the pig, the whole process. There's going to be small children there who is the first time they've seen an animal opened up. It's going to be the best experience they have, unless they go to medical school. You know, because I don't know other times where you're going to be able to see the insides of an animal that was just killed. You know, it's pretty rare.
We did that with our students.
Huh?
Last fall we did that with our students, the chickens.
Yep.
We had 12, they were done. It's like, all right, you're all going to be a part of it. And they could elect not to, or they could elect to just come, but some of them, they wasn't there, got their hands on it.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, my only thought about that is that the children these days are children that have grown up completely sheltered from all of it. And on top of that, their caregivers themselves avoid thinking about death. So if this happens in front of a child, then...
I don't say, we're not necessarily shooting pig in front.
No, but I'm seeing the inside of it. You know, I'm just... that's my only concern. In terms of
Well, the thing is, if we don't go through this process, if we don't honor the pig in front of them,
yeah.
they're going to go play with a frog and tear it apart somewhere else. You know what I mean?
I'm not disagreeing with doing it. I'm not disagreeing with doing it all. It's fantastic.
Yep.
And important.
Yep.
It's just that, just the process of witnessing that coming in from our society and having no support, when they're traumatized, they go home, their parents can't even talk to them because of whatever reason, that alone actually can end up hurting kids, right? It needs to be guided. That's what I'm saying.
They hunt deer in your neck of the woods, don't they?
Yeah.
There are occasional deer hunters, for sure. It's just that it's limited, the amount of exposure. I mean, we have country kids, for sure. There's lots of country kids who spend way too much time on their handhelds. They're already into this mode. And they are, in this generation, I feel like I'm shifting to the next generation and sort of talking about a generation prior to me. But I feel like they are so convinced that they can just watch a video to learn how to do anything. And so just getting them the smell in the hands, that tactile function to hold a knife or to do any of that is just a leap. Like they are really convinced if they just look it up on the
I
YouTube.
moved to Vermont in 1973, and one of my neighbors had a steer, and two young kids the same age as my daughter. The steer's name was Meat, so they would never forget what the steer was there for.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think the disconnect is growing. The idea is how do we reconnect? How do we reconnect? How do we create these mechanisms? How do we create these forums that is not expensive to learn, that it's a community basis, that you can be empowered in these situations, versus sort of just the schooling that I think we generally received is not of that nature. It's not something that then, I feel like I can do this myself. Like it's not of that level. Yes, sir.
I was just going to agree with you. I see this in my 13-year-old, on the machine all the time.
Very good with their thumbs.
Thank you. They have been practiced.
Yep. They are.
There's a non-DSM, it's not a clinical term per se in the DSM, but it's a term called nature deficit disorder. And you're speaking of it. And there is a disconnect, especially with the younger generation. I see it in my 13-year-old versus my middle child who is climbing trees and in the woods. And there's just a different person in them, too. And what you're doing is sort of bridging the gap back to nature, it sounds, for all of us, not just for our youth. And that's important, especially when we're relying on our youth for future earth stewardship.
Absolutely.
Amen to you.
Okay, so maybe I should talk a little bit more about the actual systems in place at the acres. I think particularly in relationship to soil building and to the food system that we're trying to develop. So maybe first I'll talk about the soil building. And I think it's just like such an overlooked in our society, the importance of soil. This is the epidermis, the fragile skin of the earth. It's really what the boundary between the earth and sky is, what is the basis of all our biological actions that we're able to. It's the basis of the food system. It's the basis of the food pyramid. This is where we're getting all our nutrients and energy from. When we look at what we got going on in New Hampshire, on our land, this mountainous terrain, we've elected to use a no-till agricultural system. So we're not doing any tillage. We're not doing any mechanization in our food production system. It's all handwork with broad forks and garden forks. And the idea is that the tiller is the destructor of soil, tilling. It's sort of been accepted in various circles. This is part of the problem for, say, 50, 60 years. There's a book published in the 40s called Plowman's Folly. It was a really popular book that sort of encapsulated what was going on. And this is it. The Midwest, originally had some of the best agricultural land in the world, the Midwest of this country. And it was difficult for us to pioneer in that region until, say, the 1840s, 1850s. Right around the time that the economy in New Hampshire was collapsing, the West was able to be opened by the plow. And so this is literally, 150, 175 years ago that this technology came on the scene. And at that time, this great fertile loess soil of the Midwest was impenetrable. But now we had the plow, we got in there. There was rumored to be 6 feet of topsoil in these areas. Now, after continually turning this soil and exposing it to wind and water erosion, it had like 6 inches left. It's all migrated down, eroded. Soil has moved downhill, down into the oceans, into the ditches. This is tragic. It is epidemic in proportions. We hear you hear a lot in discussion about like soil conservation or erosion control measures. Like, it's triage. We are literally trying to stop a problem. Where we need to be is on the other end of the spectrum, where we're building soil. So what we need to be hearing about is soil production, soil regeneration systems. Because we're losing this. It takes about 1,000 years to build an inch of soil. We're losing inches per year. We are getting at a terrible deficit on this soil issue.
With everything we know and have learned and whatnot, is there a way to speed up the growth of topsoil more than 1 inch per 1,000 years?
Heck yeah. There is. What we're trying is this no-till system. So we're using a lot of cover crops and crop rotational strategies to rebuild the organic material. The no-till system also, what it allows you to do is mimic the natural system. So instead of exposing the soil year after year to the wind and water, you're building from the top down. Using plants to do this, dynamic accumulators. You're also using compost, different mulches.
It becomes a what's the price of energy question, because the lower the price of energy, the lower the cost to bring in all those materials to build it all up again.
Or you can grow them mostly on site. Some of it is an importation strategy. Like, for instance, we have brought in seaweed. We have brought in compost and animal manures from off-site. At this juncture, because it's so readily available, and so the fossil fuel, the luxury we have of fossil fuels have enabled us to do that. But the idea is to, as much as possible, I'll take the low-hanging fruit right now. I'll take somebody's manure from off-site.
Yeah.
But long-term, it's going to be more of a leaf mulch type scenario. We're really using the northern forest to develop our organic material and the vitality of our soil.
Right, but I'm interested in the whole Midwest, right? Because either you can literally somehow manage to grow all that stuff, but I don't think you can, because you have to import all the nitrogen and whatnot stuff. So
I
it's going
think
to be an import problem.
the question of the Midwest and the monocultures of the Midwest, the cereal grains, is we need to move away from corn and wheat and soy. We're just way too one-dimensional in what we're growing in these regions. And particularly corn is just a super heavy feeder. It requires a whole lot of nitrogen. So to grow hundreds and hundreds of thousands of corn year after year in the same fields requires a lot of natural gas. Natural gas is what we're deriving the fertilizers to make that possible. And those fertilizers are also very transient, so they don't necessarily fix in the ground, and they move very rapidly. Whereas to build soil in a more natural way, we would use plants, leguminous plants, peas and beans, that are nitrogen fixing. I really like that term, nitrogen fixing. It's like fixing the nitrogen problem. But really what it means is you're putting nitrogen in the soil that's stable and not as transient as that's surprised through these chemical processes.
Right, but you can't see that then too.
Do you keep track, like, do you know how much topsoil you had when you started your farm? And
Yeah.
where you are with topsoil today?
Yeah, I have a pretty good idea. I mean, it varies in different locations, but the way we're judging it is, I stick my hands in the dirt, and I smell it, and I taste it, and I assess it and so forth in terms of observation. We do soil tests on occasion, but also the main test or the metric that we've been using is the quality of the produce. The product is just gone through the roof compared to what we had. We were just scratching along, sort of fair to midland produce, and now it's green and lush and just vivacious to a degree that I'm impressed. I've seen the difference. it's been a long road to get to that point. Let me go ahead and I'll change gears and talk about the process that we're using with the pigs. And I think that's another way we're building the soil besides the no-till. We have pigs. And the pigs are fitting into this sort of forest to field to a recomposition of the forest process. And this is a process that could take 10 to 15 years to really see through, and to see it climax is another, probably 50 to 70 years. We're going to be on my lifetime. But in year one, we'll go into a patch of forest and make a cut, do a patch cut, clear cut. Take out all the woody biomass and either build with it, use it to heat our establishment, or chip it and use it as mulch. So the year one is clearing the forest. Year two, we put the pigs on it. We're using electric fence and putting pigs on the terrain at fairly high concentrations. Say, up to say probably 20 an acre. Pretty high concentrations. That depends too on how old they are, sort of the time of year. There's a lot of variables to that. We feed these pigs mostly with vegetable waste from the town of Plymouth. We have relationships with institutions, the Plymouth State University, the local grocery store, Main Street restaurants. We go to the back door, we give them a 5-gallon bucket that's empty and clean, and they give us one bag that's full of like vegetable scraps. So that's how we're feeding those pigs. So the pigs are up there on the side of the hill, and they're doing an ecological disruption. They're more or less like a fire or a flood. They come in there and they prevent the northern forest from growing right back. Because the northern forest is super vigorous, and it is acclimatized to that region. And what I'd like to do is get to the stage where I could be planting in black walnuts and persimmon and other edible plants. But I've tried to do that, just planting into the forest. And the balsam fir and the pine and the birch are too powerful. One, because they don't have to produce really nice persimmon for me or apples. And the other reason is just so adaptable to the location, the existing vegetation. So what I need to do is use those pigs to make a disruption, to go ahead and annihilate the existing vegetation and not give it a chance to resprout from its roots, not give it a chance to resprout from seed. Totally just denude the whole area.
Because they eat the sprouts as
They eat the sprouts and they root. They use their noses to dig. And they're either working or sleeping. These animals are just really, this is what they're designed to do, is to root out stuff. When I first got into this, it was based on old-timers' advice.
So, a quick question. Do you think like selective breeding over many generations, humans having that relationship with pigs, like selectively bred them to want to root out a lot?
There are certain pigs that are more adaptable to certain situations. Like there's a variety called the Old Spot Gloucester that they use in orchards, and they actually trained it not to dig too much. It would just go in there and eat the apples, all the drops. So there's been a long history with the pig. I'm not sure. See, this is one of those interesting questions, because this system was not possible in any way, shape, or form, in my estimation, until we got electric fencing. Like, the original colonists could not have run this system. They could not have put 20 pigs and confined them to an acre. No.
Those pigs would get over the stone walls?
Oh, yeah. The old system of raising the pigs was to let them loose and then hunt them in the fall. Yeah, they really try to lure them back in, but no, they would let off on the hillside and go eat the acorns. Go forage on your own. Because the electric fence is what's made all the difference in terms of us being able to confine these animals, and that's relatively recent.
So I have a question. I've raised pigs and I've done the whole bucket thing, and it takes a lot of time. So what are your thoughts on that? The use of your time, like collecting food for the pigs, going and like bringing buckets back and forth versus like other methods? Have you thought of any other like?
Well, we definitely do also do forage crops
Yeah.
and crop and rotation.
So you're growing such food crops for the pig specifically.
Yes, food crops for the pig, and just always having things green growing in areas. We try to have no areas where it's just bare.
Yeah.
So as soon as the pigs get off an area, we'll either go right into garden and transition or into a forage crop.
Nice.
But yeah, as soon as they work it down to bare ground too, you don't want to leave them on that. You want to keep moving them.
I'm sorry, I'm just looking.
Hey, no problem. You look all you want. So in terms of coordinating with the towns and the municipalities and so forth, it is at this point. I've been doing it for close to probably over 10 years now. And I've spent a lot of time, trips back and forth to time consuming.
Yeah.
Where it really works good with us is we originally started doing it when we were making deliveries of bakery products.
Oh, so you're going there anyway. There you go. See, that
So we
would
have
have
a
made it worthwhile.
reason to go, and then we pick up the stuff on
Yeah.
the same trip.
That totally makes sense.
Now we're not doing so much bakery stuff, but I'm also picking up other items from the town. I pick up a lot of cardboard from the town as well. So like we do a substantive. I mean, I have a pretty large dump truck, and just pick up a large volume 3 times a week.
Yeah.
So it's worth the trip. We
Yeah,
feel like.
I gotcha.
But it's almost to a scale. I mean, we're taking a vast majority of the food waste
No,
coming
it's
out
like
of town.
I know how much pigs eat because I only had 4, and I was getting tons of buckets, and they were just going through those buckets like crazy. You'd always have to try to get more buckets for them, so I can't even imagine with 20, like how long it takes to feed 20 pigs.
Well, it's the institutional food that really it makes all the difference. We get from the Plymouth State, it comes right off the buffet. Whatever the kids don't eat, they just dump it. So it's lots of rice and beans, stuff with substance.
Yeah.
I mean, they're heavy. Yes, sir.
So just now, if I understand correctly, what you're asking was, how do you guys do this thing that involves transportation? Because the transportation is the extra cost factor that suddenly becomes decisive.
I'm just asking, like, what's the balance of, like, your time to go back and forth and get the food and transportation,
Right.
which I think you answered it.
No, I get that whole thing. But then, as you reply,
Well, let me try to answer it. What are you thinking about that? I think that for us as a community organization, it's the integration with that local community.
Yeah.
It's the relationships we're building with the Main Street businesses. I mean, I'm actually supplying a service to them. I'm keeping the cats out of the dumpster.
this is exactly what I said earlier. There's some sort of like. Let me make my point. See, here's the beautiful thing about what you're doing with the pigs, right, which is really beautiful, and it's also how humans have been doing life forever until we've all forgotten it. Which is, okay, well, there are several things we want to do. We want protein. We want protein. We humans want protein. We also want to grow things. We want to do these things. Let's combine the pigs with the farming, and somehow thinking about both, realize you can have your cake and eat it too. Does that make sense?
We're trying to integrate as many different functions into the possibility. Yeah, cake is good.
Exactly, right? But that's great, right? Because now you're getting
Pigs love
pigs.
cake.
No, but here's what's great. The forest wants to keep growing, right? So fine, grow all you want. All you're doing is feeding the pigs, which are going to feed us. Pigs are happy until that fateful day, but still good life, right? So fine, grow all you want. We're not going to fight you. We're just going to make these pigs happy and then all of that. Fine, great. Meanwhile, we can now grow what we want to grow. It works out so great.
That's the transition that happens once the pigs leave the terrain. Because then we can start thinking about what the transitional crops will be.
Yeah.
So the main thing we've been successful with so far is potatoes. Like literally can take the pigs off ground and go in there and plant potatoes on rows on contour. It works really good, I feel like, because nobody eats raw potatoes. So you've got not only that window, that at least 90 days for production, plus every potato gets boiled. It's not like carrots or anything where people are eating them raw. So you don't have as much danger from potential E. coli or other sanitation issues. The pigs were just there. So you lay down the potatoes on rows on contours, and then through the summer, you're hilling them up. So oftentimes we're bringing in leaves, hay, compost, pretty large quantities, and just building beds on contour. So that season, at the end of the season, then the potatoes come up, and then we'll do like garlic, which is a great crop for us because it's once again a crop that we put a lot of mulch on, and we're really trying to suppress weeds for a season. So it's gone from forest to a season of pigs to a season of potatoes to a season of garlic. 4 years later, you're ready to plant tomatoes in pretty enriched, developed garden beds. But 4 years, for most people, a long time. Like, they would rather go in there and cut down all the trees, take an excavator, stump the whole area, and be ready to plant their corn the first year. It's just not going to work, though, because there's no fertility to that system. So that's really what we learned early on. If we're trying to make them transition to vegetable crops or to fruit-bearing plants, we've got to do something about the fertility in that interim. And so the ultimate goal, potatoes and garlic is great, but the ultimate goal is this mid-successional food forest. All right, so that's what we're heading towards. But the mid-successional food forest is like apples and fruit trees as they're maturing. We don't necessarily want a climax forest where there's like nothing growing shade on the ground. We want something that's very robust and producing a lot of biomass, a lot of protein, sort of in that mid-succession. So your apple trees are actually between 15 and 75 years old instead of 150 years old. They're still getting lots of sunlight. They're producing with a lot of vigor. That's that window that we're trying to mimic. So we're going from that northern forest that's been cut several times and really doesn't have a lot of protein power, maybe some acorns, some beech nuts, into something, a recomposition that has walnuts, heart nuts, pecans, the mid-story with the apples, the pears, the lower story with the herbs, and also vegetable crops. So you're sort of looking to make that leap into a transformation of the northern forest.
So how long would let's say you get 1,000 acres somewhere, right? And somehow the funding to do exactly everything you want to do and all of that. How long? Until that forest that you just described is now suddenly the way humanity can be fed?
I would say between 20 and 50 years. Like, where we are right now is we've just started having problems with the amount of food we're producing. Like, we don't know what to do with it all. It's becoming, there's too many apples, there's too many nuts. We have to start trying to figure out what to do with them, the next steps. Like, we're already to the degree where, our food self-sufficiency has gone from, when I first moved there, we just brought a half bushel of garlic and planted that, to now, there's definitely times where 90% of our food is local, or from the farm. And there's definitely I would say overall, we're probably at 60%, 65%. We may never be like 100% in oils and stuff like that. But we're pretty close. And we're feeding hundreds of visitors per year. So it's not like just a small farm with a couple families. It's sort of a mecca of food. On a typical farm feast breakfast, the first Sunday every month, we'll get between 100 and 200 people in 3 hours come through. And it's all produced on site. The flour and oil that we use for our pancakes is made in Vermont. But everything else is from the land. And we're feeding nearly 200 people once
If
a
you
month.
guys had had the funding, the expertise, and guidance from the get-go, and you didn't waste a lot of time and went about it the right way, how long would it have taken you to get from where you were to where you are now?
Probably about the same time in some considerations. just because the process of building the soil, the process of making that transformation without mechanization is there's a window. But the system that we're building is just way more resilient. It's way more compatible with human scale development. It's way more hands-on.
But the timeline is what the timeline is.
The timeline
Right.
is what
It's
the
what the
timeline
timeline is. And if someone complains about it, then go talk to somebody else to fund it, right?
Well, what we need to be doing is making these transformations today. I mean, if we look at like the forest gardening concept in itself, if we can imagine every institution around where they have landscape crews, mowing the lawn or tending to the rhododendrons or the crab apples or whatnot, if instead they had real apple trees and blueberries and we're gardening in that lawn space, the food issues we're facing in this country would be completely different. If vegetables were inexpensive and readily available because the land is there and we're already supplying the expertise. I mean, turf care. You know how much money goes into turf care in this country? The gazillions of dollars that is spent on maintaining lawns. If we just transform that mindset into food production and perennial food production, where really all people have to do is go out and harvest the blueberries. Yeah, let's do that. The long-term goal of our project is to not only like make this transformation into the food system, but it's also to make a transformation in how we own up to the land. Like currently, we have this system where I'm going to be inheriting this property, but I don't necessarily have someone who wants to inherit it. Right? And this is the problem with agriculture in general. If we're going to run these long-term polycultures that take like 75 years to really, really, really blossom, like who's going to? How does our society get a grasp on that? I mean, we're working on annual cycles. We're looking on quarters. We're looking on monthly cycles. Like, how do we get beyond that as well? Get beyond that so that we can do this in such a way that it's not necessarily dependent on your blood, like who you're related to. So how do we make these farming entities
turn it into a retreat center?
Oh, or don't do weddings. If somebody says do a wedding,
When I say the word retreat,
okay.
right? Like obviously in this society we think whatever we think, but then of course Buddhist retreats are also called retreats.
Oh, well, that is a major component of what we do is overnight accommodations. We take families show up and spend the weekend with us or a week. It's sort of like a farm stay in Italy. It's really possible. So it's an analog to what's going on in Italy with the farm stays. So yeah, we do camping, and we really use that as an opportunity too, because we get lots of people that are up in our area because they're up for recreation. There's a big rock climbing place where we're close to where we are, and so all these people show up with like spandex and their BMWs and stuff, and they're like rock climbers, and we say, oh wait, we have a composting toilet, and you're about to eat food that we just harvest from the garden. And you see those chickens out back? That's who made your eggs for breakfast. So it gives us a really good crossover into a group of people that wouldn't ordinarily be exposed to this. And so in essence, it is a retreat that is serving us economically. It's providing us with a lot of income, but it's also meeting our mission goals. We're reaching a segment of the population that otherwise we wouldn't have access to. How do we get in touch with those people?
So I was thinking of a different variation of essentially the same concept is, first of all, people don't have to pay to come, right? That's number one.
Well, if you want to come work, come on. You don't have to pay.
But what I'm saying is, but here's what I'm saying is, the working on land, on the land, right, is everyone, well, people know it is therapeutic for body, soul, spirit, everything, right? And so there, if it could be made to be something that people from their busy lives who realize I need to get out of the city, at least give me 6 months on the land, it will be good for me. They can talk themselves into doing that. They go, they get the best training possible. They reconnect with themselves, and they choose whatever function that they would like to take ownership of for those 6 months. Join the community, learn how life can be done differently among human beings in community. All of that, and then when it's time for them to move on, the next person comes in. It's something that perpetuates, and therefore it doesn't have to worry about the generational inheritance thing.
That, I think we are super successful at that at this juncture. That's typically, well, we take a lot of people as transients, so wolfing model. You guys are familiar with willing workers on organic farms. So that's sort of what we were into when we moved to D-Acres, and we've continued with that model. We've reinforced it in certain ways to sort of require more of an immersion program, more of a buy-in with the community. So like you're cooking meals, you're helping do the dishes, you're helping the laundry, you're really immersed in, you're helping decision making. You're sitting in the weekly meetings where we decide what to do. So it's a pretty advanced program as far as an immersion, a 6-week immersion, a 6-month immersion. What we want to do is take it the whole next level. We want to get strangers together who are interested in farming and get them a piece of land and some tenets, some principles, some structures to get going. And we want them to occupy the land. There's so much available land of this nature, slightly marginal, that's out there that needs to be retaken. It needs to be occupied. This is land that can provide the opportunities to people if we have the right tools, if we have the right organizational structures, if we have the right ownership structures that give people equity, that give people security, tenure. This is the next step. What we've done is just this basic introductory. This is a platform.
No, you're
for
showing
the next
what
step.
you have done. And this is so important that you have done it, because in numbers, in metrics, it is well documented, indisputable, that if you do the right thing and you just manage to think forward at least more than 1 or 2 years, then all of a sudden this certain acreage of land in this particular climate, in New Hampshire, can support way more people that live on it. There is a way for more people to be supported than live on it. In other words, other people can do other things and then provide other things that are perhaps necessary, right? And still get fed. So the community as large can actually be sustained in that climate, and that's now documented. And that's good to know, because that can be taken into an investor and talk big bucks and do it on a larger scale.
Yes and no. To me, we're trying so hard, I think, to make novel systems fit in our old paradigm, to make it a business plan. Like, I struggled for years to try to figure out how to make this viable as a business plan. And when we started as a nonprofit, I went around to various family members who were into capital investment, entrepreneurial investment, and tried to talk them into this. One of my uncles who does that sort of business, he told me, you have an idea, but it's marginal. What you should do is go out to all your relatives and shake them down. Try to hang them out of a window and see what falls out of their pockets.
Shake them, like coerce them, like.
Oh yeah, go. That's how. That's the standard business model. If you have a really good idea, you're trying to bring in funds. You're trying to raise revenue. What I'm trying to do is provide an opportunity. I think it's slightly different. Like, we have to want to do this for our own good, not for profit, not for it's not a capital investment. It's an investment in our people. This is how we prevent us from being the next ones on the mass extinction.
I think the struggle we're hearing is the entrepreneurs, and didn't hear what your background is, but the sort of social capitalist, social venture urge to scale up.
Yep.
To quote, save the world by taking a very good idea and a set of systems and scaling it up. somehow. And I think what we heard yesterday from Reverend Zucker was, no, you got to do what works in that locality. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to take this and transplant it to Illinois. They don't have the northern forest to worry about. They've got other things. So maybe they need to be using mushrooms and worms to smell pigs.
D-Acres is completely unique. It's based on, some of this personal history, some of the location, some of our interests. Has evolved a system, the time, when we develop. And so, like, we have neighbors who are populating around us, and in talking to them, I have to be totally clear with them, you are not trying to build the acres. Don't go down that road. You need to build what you need to build for your family and for this space and for your land, what your interests are. Because, this is part of the process. It's not cookie cutter by any means. This is going to be really an individual process, which I think is great. One of the things that I really tried to wrap my head around in our society is how we look. I think we have this perception, this principle that wealth breeds innovation, right? But it's really like innovation is built, and adaptation and evolution is built upon challenges and disruptions and uncomfortableness. It's not necessarily, I think we do have this perception that all this money, all this wealth that we've accumulated is what's driving all this higher level thinking and making us create apps or whatever we do. But I think it really has to be a cultural shift where we value different things. For me, if the two things that I would like to see in my lifetime is the restoration of the commons. And so that means, like, we're all sharing air, we're breathing the air, we're sharing water at some basic levels. We need to share the land at basic levels. And we need to change our economy so that corporations can't destroy our land, can't destroy our water, can't destroy our air for the people. So it's the restoration of the commons, and then prison abolition. And I think both those things can happen within our lifetime. And that's what we should, that's the goal. So if we could get people back onto the land and get marginalized people back with opportunities instead of being punished, this is the direction. So for me, we need a structure. Not just one. We need many different types of structures to play with, to experiment with. And so this is just a push. We're trying to push the ball down the road to continue this adaptation and evolution that we need to do, because we are in crises.
Can I ask you a question?
Should I him go first? Because he hasn't got much
Sorry,
to say.
I was wondering what the other systems, back to you started talking about systems that were in place, and you talked about soil rebuilding. Could you just encapsulate some of the other systems that you had to build up that were critical to the success of what you created?
Can I recommend, like, as a system, a couple that I'd like to hear about is, like, what about, like, septic? What about, systems of that nature?
Okay, so the built environment is one thing we can definitely focus on. But I think first off, in terms of the social system, I think is huge. Like, particularly moving there, I was blessed that my aunt and uncle had gotten themselves immersed in the community. Like, my uncle was a selectman, the moderator in the town, and that sort of thing. So we had a little bit, going for us. That being said, there was also a lot of resistance to a bunch of hippies moving to town. And the reason the local taxpayers are scared is because they think we're going to breed and have a lot of children. This is the economics of it. Their taxes go up the more kids there are in town. There's only 300 people in town. There's only a limited number. There's only 60 kids in our school district. If it goes up by a large percentage, then the taxes go up. So that's what the local people were scared of with us. But what we did was open house all the time, just completely transparent. No secrets. You can look at anything. Oh, you think we're growing pot? Go look. Go explore wherever you want in the woods. Just really trying to open those doors and make that fundamental connection with the bread and butter, the salt of that location. And then beyond that, start volunteering in the community at various levels, participating in our community, in the politics. Like, I'm the moderator of my town now. And that's, as much as anything, to build up your organizational, your institutional credibility. Because that's when parents then start feel comfortable sending their kids over there. That's when the schools start feeling comfortable really getting immersed with you. You're writing letters to the editor. You're doing different things to gain yourself a little bit of notoriety and integrity in your local community, which is just and you're doing good work on a day-to-day, so the word of mouth keeps getting better. In terms of the built environment, yeah, we got the soup to nuts. There's lots of renewable energy strategies on site. So you got your solar hot, solar electric. We've experimented with lots of human-powered washing machine, human-powered apple churners, bicycle-powered gizmos and gadgets. So lots of, it's sort of the energy systems, that sort of stuff. And then composted toilets on site. We don't flush.
What do you do with the gray water?
Currently, we don't have we have a septic to handle the gray water. On some of the outbuildings, we're just sort of doing gravel, ash, sand, intermediaries.
Do you collect? Do you have rainwater collection?
Yeah, quite a bit of that, and quite a bit of water collection capacity on site. In as much as how permaculturists talk about swales and different mechanisms in the landscape. We've used quite a bit of that to use the landscape as a lens for water collection. So when rainfall happens, we're putting it on site. We're keeping it on site as opposed to letting it just go down the hill and head to the Atlantic. So it's crucial. Yeah, the water systems are built. The water, I mean, it's the reason why we don't have life on Mars. It's just so crucial. So you can have enough theoretically, but then you figure out how to distribute it.
Is that something that you had to do first, like before you did anything else, or is that something you kind of did as you went along?
Observation. All the mistakes we made could have not happened if we'd taken more time. If we'd been a little bit more patient and observing the land.
So would you suggest, in retrospect, looking at it from that lens of water harvesting throughout the land and do the kind of earthworks throughout the landscape first, like as a primary step before you start planting or doing anything else?
It sort of depends on your knowledge level, your expertise. I mean, it was literally over 10 years before we started making big moves with heavy equipment. And even that was gradual. We did some there and some here, and
so it can work as as an evolution.
Part and parcel. I think it can. It has for us. Yeah.
Is your domestic water surface water, rainwater?
We did our artesian well, not
driven well.
Artesian, yeah.
No, they call
Some
it that.
of the artesian, if it comes up out of the ground,
It's a drilled well.
It's a drilled well.
Apparently. Yeah.
With a pump.
Yep, with a pump. It's a lot of what we did in the beginning, and it's discussed quite a bit in the book, was a compromise. And I think that's an important principle as well to understand. Like even if I had wanted to, I couldn't have gone completely off the grid. It was not financing, not like the people that were financing this operation. I leveraged my parents very heavily. We're not willing to trust a 25-year-old kid with that kind of loot if they didn't feel like if this goes bad, who's going to finish it? Well, what are we going to do? with this mess if you leave it. So lots of the steps that they forced my hand to do several of these things very conventionally. The original building, the big community building, a very conventional structure, because they were like, sure, you can spend your inheritance, but we're just not going to throw away money. You know, in their mind, they were like, this is a huge gamble. So the compromise has been crucial to make this a success.
You said conventional. You didn't build.
It's stick framed.
What's that?
It's stick framed. I would.
Did you build it, or?
Oh yeah. But it's not. I mean, if I
cut it from the land.
Yeah. See, if I had most of the buildings post facto, this first building, yeah, have been cut from the land. I don't even. I don't know what to do with Killdrine. I haven't used Killdrine in years. But for this project, I did. I was coming from conventional stick frame construction history, and I was wanting to do a straw bale adobe timber frame, but I'd probably still be working on it. The stick frame, there's a reason why they went with it. We got this thing done in 3 years. It's like 5,000 square foot. It's crucial for our business. It has commercial kitchen, it has wood shop, it has overnight accommodations, it has event space, it has root cellar. If I was still working on it, I wouldn't be here talking to you. So it's a compromise. And part of that compromise too is this building is conventional. It looks similar to most buildings people are used to going. When we were living in the barn, I couldn't hardly get people to come to some of these events. The sanitation is poor. We got a pitcher pump off a dug well. Living in a barn, poor sanitation, poor accessibility. We don't get crowds. Now we got a fancy building that's got a handicap ramp. People of all ages feel comfortable going and coming. They can pull right up to the front door. Yeah, they're coming. They're having a good time. But would they have come unless we made that portal so wide and so inviting? So some of that is lessons that, I feel, I always had this like, oh, God, I can't believe we're using stick frames and I'm using this nail gun right now. We're putting some plywood. I hate plywood. But now that it's over and we're getting the traffic and we're having the effect, I can sort of live with it, I guess. It's me that did it, so I sort of, I'm the one that has to live with it. And that's ultimate, yeah.
So I see a maple syrup there. Are you producing syrup?
Quite a bit. We try to do the seasonal activities of sort of the normal farm. It helps. It's once again a real good analog for the local kids, and the local culture and the local community. Because if we go too far afield and we're like trying to grow indoor tomatoes in the winter or something like that, they're like, whatever. They want to grasp those roots. So it's a good that activity, haying, great activity. Seasonal activities are awesome. Really appreciate that. Sort of that tradition and building that into our culture once again. I really like seasonal activities.
I am wondering what you came from an affluent background and you spoke about major deficit disorder, which I'm really fascinated by, but one of the things that I know is also we're suffering crisis because we're disconnected from each other. And I hear a lot of comments, they're kind of driving in their BMWs or those hippies. What are you guys doing to make it more inviting for both? Because we're never going to expand until we overcome that.
Well, believe me, I'm the first one to be called a hippie up there too. So it's not like I have something against it. I try to be hard on myself a little bit, and I think other people that are somewhat entitled that maybe aren't realizing it, I'm projecting energy towards them. But I'm trying not to disenfranchise myself or recognize that I am the problem.
And certainly not just you. I mean, we've been on a lot of farms, and we also live in an affluent community where neither would come together because they look at you and they're saying, he's disheveled, he must be crazy, you look at them, oh, they're never going to get this, they're just ignorant and continuing their ways. And until we can open up those conversations, someone has to say, okay, today I'm going to comb my hair and go in because I know they're never going to not judge me. So you have to like understand how humans interact and how they work and how they judge. And I just was wondering if you guys were thinking about that.
No, I'm a failure. I'm a total failure at this. I'm just not comfortable. Well, some of it is because my parents totally get this. They totally get it. They've read more of this stuff than I have. They're the civil rights era, the whole 9 yards, they totally get this. They are not willing to let up their creature comforts. They've told me flat out, I'm not living like you're living. There's no way. And it's just like, I don't understand at what level, my dad from growing up in a working class community got to this level. He projects this less than my mother does. But my mother had this like huge reaction from the women's rights movement where she like wants my dad to cook, wants my dad to clean, and like she's like projects this, and she doesn't want to have to do housework. She doesn't want to have to cook. She doesn't want to have to like live that life. She's so far removed from it, and she does not want to go back. Mm-hmm. And so this is my mother. This is like the woman I love more than anybody in my whole life. And I can't convince her. And doing this work is not convincing her. So I don't know how to do it. I'm sort of trying, almost like shock treatment.
Can I help you? I'm trying to help you.
No. I'm trying to get,
Well, I think what you guys are doing is beautiful because it's the answer to how we connect to the earth. And through that, you can also connect to each other. But the dialogue, someone has to be comfortable with starting that dialogue. Like, why don't you feel comfortable with this? So it requires some vulnerability. She'd have to say, what is it about that really scares her or would be uncomfortable? Mm-hmm. But you certainly could do that. And it might not look exactly the same as how you live, but there could be small things that she could implement into her life.
Oh, you are onto something here. You are definitely, this is the crux of the issue. And I'll say, in terms of like reaching our goals, the biggest problem is getting along. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We have all the technology, we have all the plant matter, we have all the science. The thing that we're lacking is the get along. To work, to be compatible and work for mutually beneficial goals. And to really break it down and be like, well, Mom, what do you need? What do you really need? Do you need security? Do you need comfort? Like, what is it that air conditioning is bringing you? Mm-hmm. Like, what is it that being able to drive to this town and get your coffee and do exercise in a heated pool? Like, what is this really? What's it really about?
Yeah, and like on that note, all of her comforts, all of your comforts, though they look vastly different. Even if you have all of those, if you couldn't get along, none of it would be worth it. It's human connection. So like, no matter how organic you're eating, if you don't have someone that loves you, it's probably not worth it.
Yeah. Right now we're sort of agreeing to disagree. I mean, she's up with us this weekend and stuff, and she's taking the kids to the fort or something today. I mean, she's on board. She's just not willing to grow her own food. I feel like I had a lot of motivation to see radical change when I was 25. And I just really haven't seen as much as I would like. My patience just seems to be getting thinner. So I guess I'm just more abrasive than I was. I don't know how to make a really reasonable case when I feel it's just so rational, the choices we have to make. And I think it harkens to what you're saying in terms of right or wrong. Like, I just am troubled by the whole scenario and would like people to take a affirmative step forward. And so it's just perplexing at some level. And I think this this is the crux. How do we make this so it's acceptable to everyone? And we can make the next steps that we need to, that people can find the work that builds their souls and builds our culture.
I think you're doing. I mean, that's what this whole move. If you want movement is. I mean, you're doing it. I mean, we can't change the world, and I feel like what you have going on in New Hampshire is, regardless of whether you're touching every issue, you're infecting people, or you're infecting like the people around you with this way of living that is important. And I just think that, you know, there's no way that your business or your acres is going to hit every single issue that we have. I just think that you're infecting the people around you with this.
An infection.
Yeah.
All right.
Like a virus.
One thing I've noticed is with every group, I mean, like every generation, we always, like me personally, I am more of the outdoors kind of person. And it's like I grew up in the suburban home where it's like dad worked and came home and it's like mom was home all day. I saw that, I wanted to get away from that, like where I have a brother and a sister who are basically going that same path. And there's always going to be those people that, like you said, move to suburbia from this lifestyle, and eventually their children will probably be the next ones to jump back into this to get away from what they grew up with, because it's like we all see different problems within our so-called environment that we're brought up in, to where we don't care for it anymore.
I think for the most part, people don't feel like they have that option. And I feel, I might have like a weird perspective knowing certain groups that I know, but I feel like there's somewhat of a groundswell of people that are looking for opportunities to find land. And I almost jumped out of my seat when you were like, oh, and we're working for support mechanisms where we help connect people with land and have these classes and we teach them how to do it and we give them the basics that they would need to start doing their own thing. I think that's fantastic. I would definitely engage in that kind of activity. And I imagine that there's a lot of other families that feel the same way, where they're like, you know what, I don't have job security, whether they have their own business or whether they have some big job or whatever it might be, and they just assume go back to the land, to know even at the basic level that their children can enjoy that environment and that they know that they're going to be fed and kind of have a wholesome, living. I think and I don't think it's going to be everyone, but I think that there's certainly a cross-section that's very interested in that.
That's big where I'm at. If we give people the opportunity, if they have the tools, if they have a framework that they could jump into with some level of comfort. So, because when we jumped into it, it was really just because there's no framework. I'm like reading Helen and Scott Nearing about their experience in the '60s, and it's 1997, and it's just like radically different. I mean, some things are radically different, and trying to forward or pioneer that path, exhausting in itself. So I'm excited that we can pass some of our experience on to others.
And you're doing it. You're bridging the gap. As Lydia pointed out, meeting people where they're at. You're bridging the gap from where they're at and where we as a global village need to be. You mentioned crisis. We are, at the 11th hour, if not a minute before. We need to do something. So it seems like, Josh, the next step or evolution in acres is perhaps bridging that gap. Meeting people where they're at, being accessible to folks.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see what happens when I pass on. I think that's going to be the ultimate challenge. When it's left to others to figure out what to do next.
So you're excited to see that happening once you have passed on, and you're going to be watching others continue to work through this.
Sure, I think I'll still be there at some level. Why not? I put my soul into the place, the land. I'm really rooted there. So I'm excited to see what happens.
Spreading rashes out in some of them.
Yeah, no, it's spreading my soul to the cosmos and let's see what happens. Yeah, it's really exciting to me.
Josh, my question, is it still the same handful of people that started the acres?
My
When you
family.
say we, who's we?
My family's still involved pretty heavily. The we seems to change on it. It's sort of a cycles of people that come and go. We probably have.
There's a core, like who?
Yeah,
it's
probably
not
about.
it's not those 3 people that came from out west and your sister. And,
It's probably about 50 to 100 people that live in the area that attend, a half dozen events through the year.
How many actually work?
How many actually work at one time? This past summer, we had a core group of about 12 that was there for a total of, any one period of time. And right now we're down to 5 plus a 7 and a 9-year-old. So it sort of swells. In the winter, it goes down 5, 6, 7, and then in the summer, try to stay less than 15 at this juncture, just because we don't have enough experienced personnel to really help the inexperienced ones.
This is sort of eco-village-esque.
Oh yeah, it's on that road. The next step is really developing how we're going to share the equity, share security, share land tenure, make it intergenerational. So that's an exciting challenge for the next maybe 20 years in my life at least. Try to do that, and then hopefully leave the place better for the next generation. 7. Oh, we want society to go for at least maybe 30,000 more years, right? Because they were doing like seriously good rock art 30,000 years ago, and we've come to this place. So I figure we got at least 30,000 more years we can define our culture and keep moving. That's sort of my goal. 30 to 60,000 more years, I think, would be great. Big for shooting for those goals, and not going to Mars. I'm not into that. I don't really think it's pretty. I like the Earth much better.
It's too big.
Yeah, it's too. I don't.
But they're changing on Mars.
Oh God!
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you guys. You guys are great. Thank you so much for your high level of participation. It's very important.